Welcome back to Legal Candy. I am your host, attorney Candace Ross Colucci with the Colucci Law Group. And here at Legal Candy is where we are serving up the little juiciest morsels of legal insight to any of those big cases and issues that you have been seeing. And we do it sometimes with a little bit of wit. And who we have today to give us a little bit of that wit, our co-host for today is Melissa Center.
Hello.
And Melissa has a lot of titles, but one of her greatest titles is she is the world's best gift giver ever.
Yeah.
That's what I think. I think it's so thoughtful, the gifts that you give. And
that's the best gift I've gotten.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much. So today we are pulling back the curtain on Hollywood's Saga with Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni. And the lawsuit has been filed. The legal battle that spans allegations of sexual harassment, retaliation through a coordinated smear campaign, and even a high-dollar countersuit that has been filed since then. So we will explore the role of an intimacy coordinator on the film set, something that I just recently learned about myself, and that razor thin line that's probably going to be a huge issue when it comes to the legal formalities and the legal analysis that's going to take place in this is going to really center around the intimacy part of this film. So let's sink our teeth into those details. I'll give you the legal disclaimer before. Nothing that we say today creates an attorney-client privilege. If you have any questions, we also have a law firm, Colucci Law Group. Feel free to reach out to us. Our number is 727-733-9438. And if we can't help you, we'll point you in the right direction to someone who can. Everything in today is opinion-based and from the internet. So if it's not correct and you don't really like it, please go research and find your own information. And with that being said, let's get into the details. We'll talk a little bit about who these people are, because they have been thrust into the limelight. So some of the background of these parties are Blake Lively. Blake Lively is an actress. She was on Gossip Girls and a string of blockbuster films. She stars in this movie that becomes the centerpiece of this issue, which is called Ends With Us is the name of the film. So Blake Lively's been in the industry for a while. She was a kind of a teenage star, I think a long time ago, on that show, Gossip Girls. And then she ends up marrying Ryan Reynolds. So that's a star most people know a little bit more. He's from Deadpool and some other films, kind of a comedian.
Which comes into light in this case as well.
Yes. Very high profiled he is. She's not as big a star as Ryan Reynolds is. I think this is probably some of the most publicity I think she's ever gotten will be with regards to the lawsuit.
They're a Hollywood power couple.
For sure.
Well, together they're a Hollywood power couple. Are. We have MK, our other co-host, who's off camera today. So she'll be adding in some details to make sure we're fully vetted here.
And they, if I may, my understanding is that Blake and Ryan met on set.
Oh.
While
ScarJo.
Blake and Ryan met on set while Ryan was married to ScarJo.
Scarlett
and
Johansson.
They were on the outs, and they had this insatiable appetite for one another, and that's kind of how their love blossomed out of that.
On the set. On the set where there was intimate scenes on their set. I think he was some kind of superhero, Greenlit or Green Lantern. Green Lantern was the name of the movie. Yep. So they met on that set. And so Justin Baldoni, I didn't know who he was before this film.
No idea.
I guess he's an actor and a director, and he ends up being the director on this film. So obviously must have a good background in directing. And then he also co-stars in the film with Blake Lively.
Which I want to get your take on that.
Yeah.
How do you feel about a director, producer also starring alongside, especially in this kind of drama-esque type movie?
So, I did a little bit of film when I was younger. Brush off my shoulders. I was considered a power couple too.
With my myself.
Very known. Okay, I've got a credit on IMDb. Okay, please. So
do you really?
I do. I really do. Yeah.
Okay.
So I was
You should see her. She's pretty good.
I was super interested in screenwriting, and I was obsessed with films, and so I took screenwriting classes. and wanted to be a screenwriter while I was pursuing my law career. And so what I did was I went to undergrad at USF, University of South Florida, home of the Bulls. And then so so while I was in undergrad and I took the LSAT, you have 5 years. Your LSAT score is good for 5 years. So my LSAT score was good enough to get me into the law schools I wanted to get into. So I decided like during that time, I was going to do everything on my bucket list that like I wanted to do before I started law school. Because people were like, when you go to law school, you're going to go straight from law school to working. So if there's anything you want to do, any traveling you want to do it. And I am a big fan of that. You can go to law school at any age. I was in law school with some of the strongest women that I know that were like, they were 45 years old with several kids. Like this was their last career choice. Yeah. Like, and so you can definitely go to law school at any age. And so one of the things I wanted to do was I wanted to write films. And so in order to be what I felt like, a good writer, you needed to also be doing acting. So I did do so. I did a bunch of acting classes and acted for a little while in a couple of independent films. So I got a little background in this area. So the question was, what do I feel about? Yeah, watch me.
I love it.
My film is called Experiment 7. One of my films is a post-apocalyptic film.
Yes.
Yes. So
it's frequently trending.
Just
Halloween.
So when you have and actually the film that I did, Experiment 7, the director of that film, he had written the film, directed it, and produced it, and then also starred in it. And what I would say about when you're doing all of those roles, first of all, a producer, there's several producers on a film and they can have all different roles. And really, that's not the biggest issue. A producer is usually working a lot before the film starts. It's like logistics, financing, all that stuff.
On that film?
I don't think he was a producer on this film. It Ends With Us.
Didn't they kind of
finagled him to be
army crawled him in, and she slipped it into interviews. Oh, by the way, nobody knows, but my husband rewrote in the rooftop scene and all of that,
which she has now clawed back because it was insulting. I guess whoever wrote the script, and she ended up saying, "Well, I didn't mean that he had rewritten it." But yeah, so he was not a producer. But what I would say about doing both is that when you're directing it and you've written it and you're starring it, when you're in front of the camera, it's also kind of difficult for you to see what's happening behind the camera. Right. So I think it probably could take you should be directing probably with maybe another director at that point in time, because then you find yourself in front of the film and then running back to make sure everything's going well because you're not seeing the shot as it's going at that point in time. So it can absolutely be done. It happens a lot. But I kind of see a director, if they're doing their role usually very efficiently, I think it's hard to be directing and also be in the middle of the shot, but I've seen it done really well.
But it's also kind of like airs on Dangerous. Yeah. Especially with Justin and Blake, where they are, because he's directing. So is he pulling in more intimate scenes that otherwise weren't there initially for her to kind of play off of?
Yeah. And it takes away that kind of third party that would have maybe been in the middle of them to help kind of buffer that. Right. And so when I did my film, Joe Davison, I'll give him a plug, the director, he was awesome. And it really does potentially now says, okay, well, there isn't someone else who's looking at it from the outside going, let's give you better notes. Let's change those notes. It really is him in the scene going, I'm in the middle of the scene trying to direct you, where it almost starts to look like I'm asking for these things because it may be a personal issue. Right. And you want to know what's crazy is, and Joe would tell you this, is that one of the main reasons why I was very much ended up being against the acting world was that when I started networking and workshopping, I went out to LA and was out in LA for a little while. And I've met some amazing actors, but when we would be at the studio or at acting class, that's a great area where people really kind of learn and perfect your craft. And then when I had scripts and like that and I read them, I could not find a way to separate the fact that someone says, well, you're acting and it's not really real, but I need you to make out with this guy, and I need you to touch. Exactly.
That.
So I'm like, it really is a lie. It's all a lie. I mean, no matter what way you spin it at all. When I was there, I go, first of all, I have zero interest in letting anyone ever touch me or kiss me. Nor was my husband a fan of that at all. And I realized there was no way for me to do that. It didn't work for me. And then I also realized I could never be in a relationship with someone who did it. I don't care what you call it. Cheating is cheating. What if you met your husband and he found out he was cheating on you? He goes, well, listen, we were practicing an acting scene. That's what was really happening. Or no, I was just putting on a play. Like, it doesn't matter what you say, because part of it that makes it so real is that you have to attach those emotions to it.
Yeah.
And there is a level of that happens no matter what actor tries to say to you. A kiss is a kiss is a kiss. No. That's it.
Your body doesn't discern the difference because it's...
Yeah, you get all those butterflies and all of a sudden you're getting exciting.
Almost.
Yeah, you're getting excited. You're going, hey, no, those aren't real.
Dopamine is exploding. Adrenaline, like all of that's happening and there's no way for... Well, it's just acting to your body. So calm down.
Yeah.
Libido, whatever.
And I really respect the actors who have convinced themselves of that. That it's just acting. But I'm here to tell you it's not. It is real. It's really happening. If you wanted to tell me it wasn't actually taking place, that scene wasn't happening, then I can say, okay, that's just acting. But that's not what's happening. Nobody's editing it together. You really are making out with this person. And every time I see a sex scene, even till this day, I'm reassured of how I would have never been able to make it in the industry, because those are things I would have never done. And I mean, I was just watching a film with Nicole Kidman's new film, Good Girl. And there was a scene where he's obviously touching on her breasts. They're obviously between her legs. And I've seen them kissing breasts. I mean, I don't care. There's nothing you can say to me that doesn't tell me that is actually happening. And so the actors like to convince the public that it isn't real. This is just acting. I'm here to tell you that's not true. No matter what way you spin it, it's really taking place. Now, can they usually shut off those emotions afterwards and move on with their life? Yeah, I think a lot of them can. But then obviously how many relationships come out of it is because you can't just shut them off sometimes if there's something that actually develops there. So and that actually plays a big deal in what ends up happening legally here in a lot of different facets when I kind of go through it from a legal perspective. So Justin Baldoni he's now directing this film. Now, It Ends With Us is a very successful book written by Colleen Hoover. And so it is a romantic drama that talks about like painful realities of domestic violence. So it's about domestic violence, right? So it stars Lily Bloom, who Blake Lively plays, a woman after opening a flower shop in Boston and beginning a new life, finds herself torn when her past resurfaces as Lily navigates a complicated relationship with her neurosurgeon hubby, Justin Baldoni, who ends up, I guess, abusing her some point throughout the film. Yeah. She is also torn between her like lover before, who was, great and loving to her, and she bumps into him. So she's torn between these two lives. And then so you see love and abuse and some of that nature of trauma that comes along with it. And then she has to make the ultimate decision on what she's going to do. And in this film, there are romantic scenes. I don't think there actually is a sex scene. There's not a full-on sex scene.
That's like...
Yeah, not like intense. There's just romantic scenes and there's kissing scenes. And so what has come out in more recently than ever is that there's these things called intimacy coordinators. And I know them so well because one of my best friends is an intimacy coordinator in Georgia, in Atlanta.
Stop.
Yeah, she is.
Learning so much today.
Yeah. Yes. She has, and I'm going to leave her name as I'm not going to give you her name because of the fact that the film industry is very, very small. It's extremely small. And everybody knows each other. And if you get blacklisted, you are blacklisted everywhere. And so speaking out against certain things can destroy your career. But I had learned a lot from my best friend and because of the fact that I really was skeptic of it to a point. And then I really understood it through what she was explaining to me, because she started taking classes. She has become certified. So I'm like, tell me about these classes. I want to know, like, what does a class look like in order to become an intimacy coordinator?
That's crazy.
So what they're supposed to be doing is they're supposed to be ensuring that an intimate scenes are choreographed safely and consensually. And that was really what my friend had explained to me, that that if you want to really do a sex scene right, it really should be coordinated so that everybody feels comfortable of exactly how far the scene is, what exactly is being showed. Because what takes place on a script is, when a director is writing a script, they don't usually have all these details of the sex scene. They're going to literally just be like, and then they start making out.
And then they knew each other.
Yes. Yeah. The sparks fly, and then they make love. Well, that's what's written on the script. But what actually now becomes shown on the scene is something that somebody like an intimacy coordinator will be responsible for, of making sure that everybody understands from the very beginning of what's happening to the very end of what's happening. When does a top come off? When does a hand go underneath the shirt? What are you wearing? What's being covered?
I do like how you describe it as choreography, right? Because it's not only, I'm assuming, between the actors partaking in the scene, but they also need to know, I'm assuming, like for cinematography, like where the cameras need to be, where the lighting needs to be. So it's like this whole encompassing thing. So everybody needs to be on the same page, which it sounds like these people are brought in to kind of actualize, right?
And that's why you hear some people who are actors who go, well, it's just acting and it's not very romantic because it's very coordinated. Well, that's when you're on a set where there is a lot of coordination. Now, it's not a mandatory to be on all sets to have these intimacy coordinators. Some factors that'll usually play into it is going to be your budget. Do you have enough money to even afford an intimacy coordinator and for your film? Are you using one? You can use them in kind of any way. You can have a consultant who you only meet with at the beginning. Or you can have somebody who's there you meet with in the beginning, you coordinate the scenes, and then you actually act them out, and they are there through every single step of the way. And that's what you'll see when you hear actors go, well, it was very robotic. And that's what they're talking about. And then you have actors who don't want to have an intimacy coordinator because they don't want to lose that really momentous kind of, evolving.
AKA method acting.
Yes,
right?
Exactly. Exactly. And you know what was interesting is there is a film called Honora. And I think it may have been nominated, but it's an adorable little film. But she plays the main actress plays a stripper, and there are very intense scenes. And she just did an interview where she says that she was offered an intimacy coordinator, and she had agreed, her and the main actor had agreed together that they didn't want one. And she said it was a beautiful experience. And I think she may be single. I don't think he may be single. But there are times of which they don't want the intimacy coordinator because they don't want to lose that actual kind of,
the organic moment of the scene.
Yes. So what takes place in this film, from what now is being kind of the pieces that we're getting, is that Justin Baldoni did have an intimacy coordinator, and that he met with the intimacy coordinator at the beginning of the film, and he asked Blake Lively, allegedly, to join. And she said no, that she didn't want to join then, but that she would potentially reach out to them at the start of filming and utilize their services then or something. Which never takes place. So
but
he
one
meets
of
with
her
them.
big complaints was there was never an intimacy coordinator.
It's a point of contention, surrounding the movie about allegedly there were 2 intimacy coordinators hired and credited on the film.
Yes.
But there were certain points where Lively's team alleges that she didn't want one and she did want one, and Baldoni vice versa. So I definitely think that's going to play out, in Discovery.
Absolutely.
And
I think in his favor as well.
And I think that
what we've seen so far.
Correct. Yeah.
So, which is crazy to think that that's an
and
area
I'm not
of dispute.
an attorney.
Yeah.
I just want to put that out there. This
she just
is
plays
all
one on
my
TV.
general public opinion.
Okay. Thank you for that. Just
So
in case.
don't take it
As legal advice?
at all,
Okay.
please.
Your
Maybe
opinions.
a blowhard, but not not legal.
Okay.
Sound legal
They'll
advice.
note that. Not an attorney. So that ends up being a point of contention that takes place is, did there need to be one? And I believe that if I was about to shoot a scene and I wanted a coordinator, you know very well at the beginning your shoot schedule. So I would imagine if you wanted one, all you had to do was ask for one. Because when this whole thing goes wrong, because the issue starts to develop while filming and the filming gets paused, Blake Lively then demands an intimacy coordinator to be there the entire time.
But there was one in the wings the whole time.
Yeah, just not actually doing very much of anything. And there was a lot of kind of choreographed scenes. I mean, they're not choreographed. There was a lot of improv scenes that were not written specifically in the script. But that is not uncommon that takes place if you're not using an intimacy coordinator. If you're using an intimacy coordinator the whole time, they're going to make sure everything is written and been organized in advance. But if you're not using one, then you will get things like that where it's much more in the moment, in the scene. And Blake Lively is a seasoned actress. So it wouldn't be insane for Justin to think that we can definitely improv these in the middle of them because she has done sexual scenes before. She's not a newbie or any of those kind of things. So he definitely would have taken her word for it that if she wanted to meet with the coordinator, she would have. And since she never reached out to meet with the coordinator or demanded them, then she's fine with going forward, in kind of the light of us figuring out kind of as we go.
And he did proposition, hey, I have this, she's phenomenal. She can meet with us, before the shoot, either webcam or in person. And Blake stated, no, I'm good. It's all good.
Can I read her viral quote that
yes,
she made
please,
about the
because that's
coordinator on the circuit?
What'd she say?
She said, in quotes, I think it's critical to have an intimacy coordinator. You coordinate stunts, you coordinate dancing, it is choreography. So it's to be able to say, this is what happens here, here, and here in a stunt. And this is what happens here and here in a dance. But now you guys put your bodies together and your mouths and whatever and just action and cut. I think that being choreographed is critical for everyone's safety. End quote.
Although she didn't require it at the beginning.
That did go viral, actually.
Yeah, and she didn't require it at the beginning. And first of all, it's not the same as a stunt coordinator, okay? Let me tell you the difference between the two. Is, and people like to compare them, but they're not. Because on my film, we had a stunt coordinator, which was literally...
You were flipping in the air.
Yeah. Honestly, it was such a cool experience. So I have this scene where I fight a dead girl that is wrapped like a mummy. Okay, this way she's wrapped like a mummy. She's got blood all over her, and we are in a very beautifully created bloody bathroom in this post-apocalyptic world. And yes, we had a fight scene choreographer, and the reason why you had to have a fight scene choreographer is because the fighting isn't real, okay? It's not real. So you couldn't just be like, listen, you two girls get in here and fight it out. Then we actually would be hitting each other. So the choreographer was important because it is a dance. We're actually not hitting each other. We're moving in ways to where she moves while I move, and it's been choreographed. So then it looks like I'm hitting her. But in a sex scene, you're actually doing those things. So I see the value of a coordinator, but it's not the same thing as a stunt coordinator because you actually are not going through with the moves. And in these scenes, you really, truly are. But I think for the protection of the actresses, I do believe, especially because my best friend has made it very clear to me all the benefits and the issues that can come into it, that you should be using them if you can afford them.
Well, really, and I feel like, too... It also, in having that person do it, it's also kind of creating a safeguard for the actors that are actually in the scene doing it.
Yeah.
Because, again, we have two very different viewpoints of how the events went down between Blake and Justin.
Yeah.
And if they had that third party kind of unbiased coming in, you might remember it that way, but the actuality of it, there's three stories to one truth.
Yep.
you know, his, hers, in actual.
Absolutely.
So I think it's just, if I were an actor, number one, I, much like you, agree with you, and I couldn't reconcile being intimate with someone else against my man sandwich. But number two, I don't want to have to explain the shapes of my body to somebody else. It's fine. What? Right? You opened with it.
I did.
So, and number three, I would want to protect myself. And if I respect my peer, my coworker, I would want them to feel protected as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I just,
and that independent film I did, there in the script there was
so watching.
Yeah,
tonight,
you should. You watch it. There in the script there was a kissing scene, and I didn't think there was a need for it. So when I was offered the role, I said, okay, well, I'll do it, but I won't do the kissing scene. And Joe, the director, was like, okay. And just took it out, wrote it out. I was like, okay, I got it. I was like, I don't think it's needed for the act. I don't think it's needed for the storyline and the arc of my character. I don't think that she would have ever kissed this character.
It detracts.
And I kind of felt that it was added for the personal freaking gain of the person who wrote it. And I don't, and so I was like, okay. And so he was like, okay, I'll take it out.
Fluff.
Yeah, he just took it out. I was like, okay. So what takes place that we know as far as timeline is concerned is that they start filming in, I think the original, so when they start filming this film in 2003. So in 2003 is when they announced the casting. You got May 2023, where the filming has begun and it's halted due to the industry strikes. August 2024, the production resumes, and then they've got tons of issues about there's being some on-set tension, and then you've got Baldoni that hires a crisis management team prior to the film's premiere. And that would be because of all the drama that had happened while they were filming. So at some point in the middle of the filming, that's when she stops everything, kind of says, I'm not going to finish this film unless there's an intimacy coordinator. I don't like some of the stuff that's happening. And she really takes control over what's taken place. And then you get the premiere. It's somewhere in August 2024. The premiere happens. And what I thought was interesting is December of 2024, just a couple months after this premiere, Blake Lively files a complaint with the California Civil Rights Department alleging sexual harassment and a hostile work environment. So let me explain to you from a legal perspective, in essence, what the concept of sexual harassment when you're alleging a hostile work environment. So a hostile work environment is characterized as persistent, pervasive, and usually unwelcome discriminatory behavior, so which means they're doing it based on some kind of protected class, either race, religion, usually because you're female or any of those kind of things, that undermines your ability to perform your job. And I used to do these lawsuits in federal court. And this hostile work environment is a concept that most people are not aware of. And it actually can have all kinds of different kind of formations of it. And all it really needs is that your company you're working for, they're doing it, or they're allowing other employees to do it, that it becomes so just traumatizing to you as a person that you cannot do your job the way that you're supposed to be performing. And it's very, very vague. Okay, so those are the requirements that you have to kind of prove to usually a jury that those things are taking place. Now, where you normally see them is like someone's getting sexually harassed. But this hostile work environment can be all kinds of different things. Like I remember there was one case that we were part of where one of the big elements of it was a woman was working at a business where the guys kept on putting like these funny meme jokes they thought were hilarious that were sexual in nature, and they put them in the work work back office, right? They kept on just putting them over and over again. And
like
then she made a complaint.
Area,
yeah.
pinboard.
She made a complaint, and the guys kept on making all these jokes and all this stuff. The boss never did anything. That is enough. And she said, I couldn't work anymore. Every time I turned around, they were making a compliment or a comment about me, and these memes were up there. So
they were directed to her.
No, the comments were, some of the comments were, but those memes up there were really directed towards kind of anyone. They thought they were funny. Yeah. They weren't so much targeting her all the time. But when you're looking at the hostile work environment, it's the totality of the circumstances. And the two things you have to show with that is there is a subjective, we talk about this sometimes, there's a subjective and an objective requirement for them, which means when you go to show a jury, you have to show that subjectively, which means you, in this position, we're now subject to this entire circumstances over a certain period of time. It doesn't have to happen all of a sudden. That creates this hostile work environment where you can no longer perform. Okay, and it has to be being done because of one of your protected classes. So, which means if you're African American and the jokes are African American, and that is so persistent, and they're so, voluminous in nature that it creates it to where you can't work, that is actionable. Really, truly is, right? So it has to be based on one of those protected classes. And so you have to show subjectively you felt that certain way. But then you also have to show the objective part of it, which means that a reasonable person in your same shoes would have also felt that they were being, they were being targeted because of a protective class, and it created this work environment that you can no longer perform at your level of behavior. I've seen cases that have prevailed where this was one case that I was like, when I was doing this a lot, I was like, that's a case for me because I love sticky notes. There was one where a woman was targeted and they would throw away the boss would throw away all of her sticky notes when she would put them up. And that was enough to say that she's being targeted because of this. And that's literally the things that can happen. So
anyway,
in this case, so when we're talking about the objective part, so you have to show subjectively you would have felt that way, but objectively, a reasonable person in your shoes would have also felt that way, given all the circumstances. This is the main cause of action that has been filed in this case. It really centers around this whole entire hostile work environment and then a form of retaliation.
Okay, because, like we mentioned before, I am no attorney. So talk to me like I'm 5. In a case like Blake and Justin's, the subjective nature of the case would be, I feel personally like Justin's crossing the line. Would the objective then be the general public's opinion of whether they find offense or not?
Yes. Yeah. So you have to choose
that. Comes into trial, or
it does. That is where the jury gets to weigh their opinion.
Okay.
The jury will be asked the question that they're going to have to determine. Would a reasonable person standing in Blake Lively's shoes, given the circumstances, would they also have felt so uncomfortable that it would have changed her ability to perform?
That's really fascinating.
Yeah. The reason why you have both is because let's just say she has sensitivities, okay? So let's just say something happens to her, but we find out that she was sexually harassed as a child. She had been in an abusive relationship. Like, let's say that she's super sensitive to things.
Or just had a baby 4 months prior, is in active postpartum.
Yes.
Which can emotionally and mentally exacerbate any woman who has had a child can understand this.
Yep.
I'm super heightened.
Yep.
Because my hormones in my body are crazy.
Yep. Exactly. So then that's the reason why that other element says, well, what would a reasonable person in her shoes have felt the same way? Or is it just maybe a sensitivity of hers? So you have to show both in order to recover under the hostile work environment prong. And that was really the huge element here. So what she does is, the very first thing that Blake Lively does after the premiere of this film is she files a complaint with the California Civil Rights Department. And what that is it is a subsidiary of something what we call the EEOC, the Equal Opportunity Employment Organization, all this stuff. And what it really means is there's a requirement that before you file certain types of lawsuits, and if a lawsuit's based on a civil rights violation, like you're being sexually harassed because of a protected class, hostile work environment, those kind of things, wrongful termination, there are things that say you cannot file a lawsuit in a regular court until you come to this court, and you have to file it here first. Not even a full court, it's a quasi court. You don't have a full trial and those kind of things. And then they will do an investigation. These departments do their own investigation, and they will give you what they call the right to sue letter. So they'll make a determination, they'll interview people, and they'll make a preliminary determination that, yes, we think you have grounds to sue, or they could come back and say that we don't believe you have grounds, that we didn't find, probable cause here. There are still instances where you can still file.
In California.
That she just happened to file in California. Every single state has their own version.
Got it.
Everyone.
Okay.
Yeah. So she files it in California. She gets the letter of the right to sue, which, as an attorney, I'll tell you, it's not that difficult to get it, and you don't get to put all this heavy evidence in it, and it's not really, there isn't a big back and forth that takes place a lot of the times. So it's not difficult to get the right to sue letter a lot of times.
So it's more like a civil case at this level versus a criminal case.
No, it's not criminal yet. There's no criminal.
Right. That's what I'm asking, or for clarification is right now it's just civil, it's not broad. Okay.
Yeah, no, but there is no criminal charges yet.
Okay.
Because that was the whole thing for why it would be not criminal yet. But I don't think it rises to the level of criminal. I actually can tell you from a legal perspective, I don't think this lawsuit will go anywhere. I mean, I think when I say not go anywhere, they will spend a lot of time fighting back and forth with lawyers, evidence, because they're all trying to make a name for themselves. And I think they all have an agenda at this point in time. Do I really think that there's enough evidence there that anything is actionable, even in a civil court? No, I don't. But I think they're probably both going to spend a lot of money and time going through this whole process. But at the end of the day, I do not believe a jury will find him liable for those things. And I do not believe that his counterclaims will also be there. This is really an opinion thing. It really comes down to that there was a line there that she believes he crossed that probably could have been communicated better between the parties if they had the coordinator from the beginning.
Right.
And I think it's a really gray line that actors always cross, right? It's a very common thing that happens when you don't have a coordinator, is that here's a scene, you just kind of improv it. And I think that's exactly what he was doing from it, was improving it. And she didn't like the improvisation of it. And so I really think that's what happened.
But she did whenever she was on set with Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah, exactly.
Just to clarify.
Yes, it worked there. And that's probably why maybe somebody got in her ear and was like, you better knock it off and not be crossing those lines, because now you're married. So I don't think either one of them are going to prevail because it's such a thin line. Because here's what I'll tell you about the hostile work environment, is that one of the elements you have to take into account when you're determining if somebody created a hostile work environment that created an environment that you were unable to perform your job to your best abilities, is going to be the number one element is, what was the environment to begin with, that, and then what is it that created to be hostile, and then what were the effects of that you couldn't do your job right. So we've had instances where I've been in a lawsuit with the hostile work environment that happened at a strip club, right? And a stripper had followed it. Well, that's different. The stuff that happens in a strip club is more acceptable than what would take place at a white collar office. So that environment plays a huge role in being able to prove your case. And that's what's going to potentially happen here.
But it's just finding the baseline for the case specific situation.
Yeah. And so I think that this is such a blurred area that I do not think it'll be a clear case for either party. And I think even the claims about defamation back and forth to each other, I think that that's also a very gray area, because if she feels a certain type of way, how can you say that that's a lie? Now, I think there's some other issues with she really was taking parts of things that were happening and not really putting all the other parts. And I think he did the same thing. Both of them are both doing it back and forth to each other. So I think at the end of the day, I don't think either one of them are going to prevail against the other, because I don't think it's as the situation is not horrific enough given the environment that they were in and they agreed to be in. The fact that she filmed the first intimate scene without an intimacy coordinator and was just trusting him to direct.
The cadence of the attitude for the whole film.
Yeah. If you wanted it to be only scripted and not improvised in a intimate scene as an actor, get an intimacy coordinator. If you're okay with it being improvised and you want to go with the flow, then you would start that scene without an intimacy coordinator and would be almost relying on the little bit that's written in a script. Like for me, one of the things that I wanted to see when I was looking at it was show me what the script says, how much information is in the script that's there, and then how much information was added afterwards. So her causes of action are, this is what I think is an interesting one, is that she's got several causes of action in her lawsuit. And I've said this before, is as an attorney, when we file lawsuits, complaints is what we call them, you're supposed to be really careful what you put in the complaint. The facts that you put in the complaint in order to show what you're alleging against this person are supposed to be very specific to your allegations. It shouldn't read like a novel, okay? That's ridiculous. Unless you're trying to get this, you're sensationalizing it and you want to get publicity out of it. And once again, I believe that these are things that the judge should be sanctioning the lawyers for when they go too far in these complaints and they're putting details in here that are completely irrelevant, but are just being used to make someone look bad. Her complaint begins with, first of all, has a table of contents in a complaint, which is also just ridiculous at this point.
And nobody looks at those anyway.
It's like 119.
Yeah, here's our table of contents in case you want to make it easier to figure out where everything's at. They literally make little chunks in the table of contents that title each thing she's going to allege as if they're each individual taglines for a tabloid.
And why for our viewers is that so extra?
It's because that's just not what you would do. You usually do the bare minimum facts that take place because they're usually not, you're not 100% if they're all true yet because you haven't started your lawsuit yet, so you haven't gotten to the discovery phase, so you want to be careful what you write, although there's a protection involved with it, which we'll talk about at some point, but it's really just supposed to be a summation of what took place, and here are our allegations. To write it like a novel and then to really piecemeal it, to me, looks 100% like there's some things this lawyer knew that are not going to be admissible in court. There are some things that are never going to make it to a trial that are not admissible. But she knew this would be enough to garner headlines. And to now potentially get all the backing that she kind of wanted. I think they wanted social media to be on her backside, really kind of egging her on that she's really part of this Me Too movement.
Even leading up, promoting the film and everything, and he was MIA at her request, but the whole time...
That's when I started thinking, what's going on?
And I think a common... in the vein of them being apart, a lot of the public were thinking, well, maybe they're just building up to the movie, right? Because it's this tumultuous relationship. So they're setting the tone leading up to the debut. But then all of this comes out and he's watching the debut that he couldn't even see prior to the premiere because she brought in her private editors or production team, whatever, to edit the movie. And it was his.
Yeah.
He commissioned and had it 6 years prior. Yeah. Blood, sweat, and tears. And then she brought in privately. And then that's what I'm having a hard time reconciling in my mind is, how was she even able to do that? How was it even...
Because she leveraged her position and her notoriety, because at that point in time they'd already filmed all those scenes. You could not possibly get rid of her, then go hire somebody else, reshoot the whole thing. Never ever could they have done that. It would have cost them so much money to do that. So at that point in time, when she halts production and goes, that's to me what I thought was interesting, is when she halts production and says, I'm feeling a certain type of way that's uncomfortable. I don't want to continue in this way. That's one thing. That to me, I'm like, okay, it shows some legitimacy. Something must be happening. But then when you further use that to then say,
overthrow.
I want all of the raw clips. I'm going to she hires Ryan Reynolds has an editor. She then edits scenes herself, which is just crazy to think of anyone doing it who's not a director of the film. She edits scenes herself and then demands those scenes are the ones utilized. And then it becomes this whole fight between him going, I've already edited the scene. So then they end up testing the scenes to a market to see.
Right, the two separate ones, and then they go with hers.
Because so they had an agreement that they were going to test the scenes that she edited and that the actual editor of the film edited. And she then agrees that whoever's tests better will go with, and his tested better, and she still goes, no, we're going with mine.
Yes.
And so to me, that seems a little bit on the side of manipulation, because any actor knows that is completely a faux pas. That would not be something that takes place unless you have leveraged your position as a celebrity and said, stop my feet, I'm not going forward. And that's what I think is one of the most egregious things. There is nothing that I have read in any of this to me that screams to me that this is a hostile work environment, that she was sexually assaulted, which I do not like using that word in a situation like this. To show me a dancing scene, that's what they show. They show this dancing scene as they release the raw footage, which is usually a protected thing in the film industry, that raw footage. It's why they don't give it to anybody. It's why they keep it, because it usually has people maybe undressed and it shows raw areas. You're saying things that you shouldn't be saying. So after she files her complaint and she alleges these things, Justin Baldoni's team decides to release this raw edited clip to show, look, she's lying. Here's what really happened in one of the many examples she gives, where she's saying that she's being sexually harassed.
That he was breaking character and showing up as Justin, not Ryle. But even in the beginning of the raw footage, which is completely damning for Blake's case, in my opinion, is she's accusing him of breaking character from Ryle to Justin, but she's already trying to take control of the scene as Blake, not as, her character. She's the one that is kind of the offender, but then turning around and accusing him of it. Because she's like, oh, well, shouldn't we stand back on the mark because of lighting? And he was like, no, it'll look right whenever the light falls behind my head as we're dancing and we're doing this scene. But she started the whole scene out of the gate trying to take control of that specific thing.
And that's why I would say there is a benefit of not being the producer, director, and star, because it just automatically looks imputed onto you as the writer and director that you're adding certain scenes for your own personal gain for it.
Right.
And that's truly one of the issues that I think kind of arises there, is that when he's in the middle of the scene and you can see this scene where they're dancing, I will say that she does have these moments where she kind of moves back, like leans back kind of away from him. And I think she's not sure what exactly was going to take place. And I don't even know what the script said. I think the script says they're romantically dancing and falling in love during the song. It probably says something like general. Something general like that. And he gets into the scene. What I did think was awesome about how he gets into the scene, in a way I believe to make her feel more comfortable, was while you're seeing the filming of the scene and you're listening to them, he's kissing her and putting his, like, he's going from side to side while he's dancing with her. But then he's talking to her about random things that are not intimate in nature. Mm-hmm. And I feel like he did that in an effort to make it seem less intimate in real life as they're doing it.
Right, because my understanding is they were just getting the visual.
They're only getting the visual, no audio.
It's going to be slow-mo.
Yep.
So they're just having this conversation like you and I would have about anything on any given day.
Yep.
And he is trying to break up like that already awkwardness I think anybody would feel in that position. But yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And I just think, and I'm like, so I think, well, if you had a coordinator, there wouldn't have been as big as an issue. Mm-hmm. Do I think that a scene like that rises to the level of sexual harassment? Absolutely not. Because I truly believe, as someone who was in the acting world, that if you're not using a coordinator, an intimacy coordinator, that means in essence you're agreeing to some level of improv. Like, that's really what you're doing, that you're improving these scenes, because no way were they written out in detail. So you're showing up to the set going, no, I'm fine with this, and as long as I'm getting direction during the scene, I am okay with going with the flow. And that means you have to be also loud enough to say if there's something that makes you feel uncomfortable, or make those things known before. So I do not think that should be considered, the way that I've seen it, as sexual harassment or rising to the level of a hostile work environment.
Do you feel it's extremely dismissive to those who are actually walking through and might throw up a red flag for anybody wanting to move forward because they are in that situation, but this was handled or brought maybe prematurely, carelessly, so that might stop someone else who's actually walking through it, especially with Blake being, this high-powered celebrity? Like,
I think I always do think that there's an element that undermines people who have been egregiously sexually harassed. But here's what I have learned as being an attorney, is that it's very difficult to weigh somebody's experience, because for some people, two people can experience the exact same situation and one person can be traumatized. And so I had a client one time where I'm telling you, when she came into my office and explained to me what had happened to her while she was working, and I filed a lawsuit for hostile work environment. But I vetted every case I vetted, and if I didn't feel good about it, I'm not going to file a lawsuit. And I'm telling you, when she sat down and we did the intake for her, and she's explaining to me what happened, if you listen to the allegations without her saying them, if I repeated them to you, you would be like, what? That's not really a big issue. Like, that's not a big deal. Like, oh, those things are very small. But I can tell you, when she came into my office and explained it to me, she was so traumatized by it. It really messed up her head. Yeah. And it could have been from whatever happened during her childhood. I don't know. But for her, subjectively, that was huge to her. And it was eye-opening for me to go, you cannot always put yourself in the shoes of other people. I know what I would do if someone tried to touch me inappropriately at work. Here's what I can promise you. There wouldn't be a question of if it happened. I always say that. There would be no question if you touched me inappropriately. You would know. Everybody around you would know. Right. When you went home, the next person who saw you would probably know. Like, everybody would know. But that's how I am. Not everybody's like me. So it really was important. And that could
even be different from the physical and then pull it into mental.
Yeah. Yep.
Because do I even know, am I being gaslit?
Yep.
Or is this really something substantial, even though I'm being affected by it? Will it be taken seriously?
Yes.
Because it's not necessarily like a physical sexual assault, but that mental warfare.
Yep.
And that is so unique to everybody and how it's interpreted.
Yep. And so what's interesting about my client was that she really came to us for advice, wasn't even sure what to do, and had worked at this company for a really long time. It really changed the way that I looked at potential clients who came in the door to really say, don't put yourself in their shoes. Don't say what you would have done, and really take your client as they come to you and say, do I believe this? And should something be done about it? And so for this client, she really came to us for advice and she loved where she worked. So the very first thing, as I was telling you before, is you have to file. You have the quasi, judicial, where you have to file in this department first. So in Florida, we had to file under EEOC, and that is a protected filing. So when you file like that, you're not supposed to ever be retaliated against because you filed it. And for her, after we filed it and they started investigating, it was what they did afterwards to her that became one of the biggest issues, where they absolutely retaliated against her. They ostracized her. They bullied her. And then when they threw away her sticky notes, I was like, we got a case. But they threw away her sticky notes. They did all of these horrific things to her, where I watched a woman get emotionally broken down. She needed a therapist. She was so upset. And then they fired her. And she was like one of their best employees for years. They had no justification for firing her. They just fired her.
And Florida's no right to work state, right?
Free will. So they technically could fire her. But I was able to put it all together that the retaliation ended up being, that's a whole separate cause of action in a lawsuit, is if they retaliate against you because you've done something that's protected, like file the complaint. And that is one of the big issues that takes place here, is that one of her allegations are retaliation. So I know we are running into our time today, so we will be back to kind of go over some of the elements, the legal issues of it, and what we're really looking at from each party, so people can really truly understand before they really kind of create the side that they're going to be on. Are you on Blake or Justin's side? Because this is a very interesting case for the entire film industry as a whole. I really believe it'll change a lot of things.
I think that it's really going to come down. It's really interesting about the discovery in this case. That's what I'm excited about.
So excited about that,
because Justin Baldoni launched that website, put everything up there, put his complaint up there, put the timeline up there, put the text messages up there. They tried to keep that, under protected order. The judge said no way, and they're still going for protective order requests. And I think we should talk about this next time, about additional protections and like the attorney's eyes only category and things like that, because she's asked this. Well, and it's
California versus New York as well. They want it held in New York because for privacy issues, while Justin, I believe, is pushing for California because he wants to publicize.
He wants transparency.
He's like, listen, I'm showing my cards.
Yeah.
Why are they trying to still, forfeit theirs from the game?
Yeah. Well, and I just thought it was egregious that after she files a 137-page lawsuit that reads like a novel of all of her versions of what took place, she includes text messages, she includes all kinds of different stuff. Then when he goes to defend himself in a public forum, mind you, he decides, I'm going to put everything out there. Then they move for a protective order. I'm just like, how dare you? Yeah. You're the one who literally, when you just said, I'm excited for discovery, I don't know what you could be excited for, because all of the discoveries here. Like, this is why their lawsuit complaints are so intensive with all of these allegations that go way beyond the requirement for a complaint, that really are what happens usually during discovery when you really start giving this information over the two parties.
And what was going to be allowed, what was going to be admitted.
Yeah, because I don't know what else could possibly happen during discovery has already been put out in both of their complaints at this point in time.
Which brings me back to what you were kind of saying earlier in terms of, you feel like it's almost, in my words, going to be a wash, right? Because they're both bringing their claim, their counterclaim. How could he not be validated?
Yeah.
In the wrongdoings of them trying to silence him, bulldoze him,
and validated in the court of public opinion. I mean,
and get your movie check, Justin.
She's the mean girl now.
Yeah, I did think that was crazy how
allegedly
how quick the public was against her, and that's what we're going to talk about, because I believe what led her to do this was what ended up happening in the publicity world. She started getting all this bad press after the film premiered that really wasn't because somebody was retaliating against her, and she thought it was Baldoni's team that they were doing it on purpose to make her look bad.
Campaign.
Yeah. So I believe that's the reason why she filed this, was because she was so angry. I don't know if I believe that she was so, distraught by the sexual harassment that she says takes place, that's the reason why she did this. No, I think she was also retaliating because she thought that he tried to do this smear campaign against her. And I do believe that she thinks that she's standing up for all women in the film industry.
Girl,
and in
sit
the world.
Down for me, though.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I don't. It's hard to me. We'll talk about the next time. We're going to pick it back up.
Definitely.
Okay. So thank you very much for joining us on another episode of Legal Candy. Please follow us, subscribe, all those great things. If you have any questions, reach out to us. Any comments, concerns, and we will see you next time.